So wonderful. So welcome back, and thank you so much for being with us for the second part of this annual event focusing on the implementation of the RRP in Malta. I'm really looking forward to this one because we were going to focus on skills and the development of skills in Malta, not only focusing on the aspects related to skills within RRP, but also specific aspects within the country-specific recommendations for Malta, because as you might be well aware, much more than myself, RRP, part of it is also intrinsically linked to the country-specific recommendations, although many might overlook this aspect as well of the implementation. And we're going to dwell on this and focus on the challenges we're facing in Malta when it comes to skills. So I urge you to participate not only in the discussion we're having with the 5 panelists, but also in the Slido question we have, if there's one policy change you'll introduce when it comes to the development of skills in Malta, what would it be? So I'll invite you to just go back on your smartphones, slido.com, insert the code hashtag MTRRP23, and create another cloud, word cloud. So the first one, following 2 contributions, it's salaries. Transversal skills, less content heavy. Birth rate, green skills, focus on entrepreneurship, improve education, green skills, corporate learning, education system, reform of education, salaries. So far we've got the reform of education, start early, transversal skills, and salaries. Those are the most dominant policy changes you shared with us through slido.com. So we've got some others who are still typing and contributing to trying to understand what are the main challenges when it comes to the skills shortage in Malta, and what, if any, policy changes would you introduce or address this skills shortage. So following 31 submissions, we've got transversal skills. This is really interesting in my view. Salaries, start early, reform of education, corporate learning, improve education, green skills. So with that, I'd like to invite on stage our next speakers, while feel free to keep on contributing to the word cloud. So starting off with Isabel Grillo from the European Commission, Director within the Directorate General of the Economic and Financial Affairs of the European Commission. So Ms. Grillo, it's nice to see you again. Same here. Ms. Grillo. Dr. Marta Sportelli, CEO of the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry. Mr. Josef Bugeja, Secretary General of the General Workers Union. So I'll make some space now. Thank you so much, Dr. Portelli. Thank you, Mr. Bugeja. Mr. Matthew Caruana, CEO of Junior Achievement Malta, JA Malta. So thank you so much, Matthew. And Mr. Jonathan Vassallo, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of EU Affairs, among other things, but Permanent Secretary of course, a high-ranking within the civil sector in Malta. So, Ms. Grillo, if I may start with you from your bird's view in Brussels. What are the key challenges when it comes to the skills shortage and skills in Malta?
Thank you very much for this question. Indeed, that allows me to give a broad view of the challenges when it comes to skills and the labor market in general. I would start by saying that Malta is facing a challenge that is not unique to Malta, that is also present in every EU member state and beyond. And it's issues of shortages in terms of labor and skills. Now, in some sense, this is the other side of the coin of a situation of historically low unemployment rates, which we are experiencing now already for some years, and a very tight labor market. Now, the truth is that though Malta is not alone in this challenge, it's possibly more affected than other member states because by several metrics, and here I will just mention one, it has a more acute problem than the average of the EU. And here I'm talking basically about, and this can be reflected through other also metrics, the fact that if you look, for instance, at SMEs and you ask them the main concerns in terms of obstacles, let's say, to their activity, while on average in the EU we get, and it's already a very high level, some 74% of SMEs identifying hiring. So finding workers with the appropriate skills for their needs is an important obstacle. This number raises up to 87 in Malta, which really shows that this is an issue. But as I said, this is a wide and broad situation. Now, in the case of Malta, if you try just to dig a little bit on, and maybe simplifying a bit, what could be behind this is the fact that Malta is actually more affected by by high share of low-skilled workers in the population, in the working population. Just to give you some figures, this value is around 1/3 in Malta against 1/4 in the EU. So in some sense, this means that the starting situation is already not very advantageous, is unfavorable. And then it's coupled with also a not very helpful dynamic in the sense that if you look at the percentage of low-skilled workers that are subject, that benefit from training opportunities, this is also a relatively low percentage. It's not even 4% in Malta against some, I don't know, 13%, if I'm not wrong, in the EU. So it's this combination of an unfavorable starting position with a dynamic in terms of how to bootstrap yourselves out of the situation that is not helpful. So this is, broadly speaking, about skills in general. But I would expect that it's also something you would like to hear. If we zoom in terms of which sectors or which type of skills are more problematic in the case of Malta. And again, it's not a very different situation from what happens in other member states, but here I will focus on the situation in Malta. So one of them is ICT or digital. ICT digital is something that it's both something that is specific to some industries and some sectors, some needs, but it's also, because, and I'm trying to make the hook here with a Slido, it's also some elements of these digital skills are also a transversal skill. So it somehow also fits with the identification of the challenges in the Slido. So ICT is one of them. And what is interesting is that, again, according to several surveys, lack of ICT skills is something that is very clearly identified. On the other hand, if you look at the number of percentage of ICT graduates in Malta, or even existence of ICT specialists, Malta comes out well in its comparison with the EU. So, of course, the gap or the missing elements is a question of how the supply and demand interplays. And what we see here, very schematically, is that Supply is there, but not enough for the type of demand that exists in Malta. So this is certainly one area where more needs to be done. And this can be done both through the education system itself, but also through training and upskilling. And we will see later that the plan has a few measures in this area. Then the second one, and I think it was mentioned in the previous panel, is skills needed for the green transition. Again, this is a broad category.
Surprisingly, it came up in our word cloud as well.
It's just for my...
I was rather surprised to see green skills among the top 6.
Indeed. So, and green skills is, again, a broad category. It's not only about skills needed for, let's say, building renovation and everything that has to do with construction that allows more efficient, let's say, energy conservation. But that is clearly an area where the demand is there and the supply not yet. This said, it's again not specific to Malta. And this is shown by the fact that very many member states had actually a country-specific recommendation in the context of the European semester, which recommends them to, as Malta also added, to improve this supply, this creation of green skills. I will not talk about the plan now, but again, we will find some measures there to address this problem. What is important to say is that, in particular in this area, the demand is only going to increase, because we have seen in the previous panel all the needs that are still coming forward in terms of investment needs for the green transition. That, of course, this also is not just capital. It needs the labor that goes with it. So this is an area that it's going to increase somehow exponentially. Then there is, when you look at Malta, there is another area, research and innovation. So research and innovation is also an area where Malta does not perform particularly well relative to EU partners. And here, what we see that is worrying also going forward is the fact that since 2010, we see a significant decrease of graduates, of students engaging in science, technology, and engineering studies. So this does not bode well going forward, and this can be a barrier to innovation at large in Malta. And then finally, this is often also in the news, the health sector. We know that this is also an area where there are significant shortages in several health professions. Again, it's not unique to Malta, but it's extremely present for the case of Malta. And we have seen that this has been partially addressed through third country professionals. Again, there will be a measure in the plan related to this. But it's something that needs probably a longer term perspective. And I think I would stop here.
Now, that was a fantastic overview of the skills deficit in Malta. I know the Malta Chamber has been extremely vocal in this regard when it comes to trying to lobby government and authorities to incentivize businesses, because this is one of their biggest challenges according to the Malta Attractiveness Survey. And also the recent ECB, when they interviewed business owners, they claimed that their biggest challenge is labor shortage and skills shortage. So, Dr. Portelli, what are the main measures you'd like the government authorities to introduce ASAP to focus on training and upskilling?
So I am here representing the National Chamber of Commerce set out in the Commercial Code. And we have, in terms of active membership, 80% of private sector employment and 75% of export. So this subject is very topical for us, and it is also the reason why in our pre-budget document, which incidentally had 250 proposals, we dedicated over 1/5 of it. So we have over 50 proposals which are there for government to take up in terms of leveraging the skills deficit that we have in Malta. Now, what was our strategy in the budget document? We believe that it is a holistic approach needs to be adopted. In fact, we based our ideas on 3 main areas. the reforms that are required in order to instigate the uptake of better skills, particularly even to ensure that human capital is more available on the market. So we have a number of incentives which are related to the pensions reform, a number of other ideas which are related to education. The infrastructure itself, we need to have a solid infrastructure to be able to cater for the skills that we need. And last but not least, a number of issues which address human capital itself. But we believe that we need to look beyond incentives. So incentives are always good. Businesses look out for incentives, but incentives on their own will not do the trick, because incentives will not cover all the deficits that we need to cover. So in our budget document, we made sure that some of the proposals are incentive-based, and I'll mention a few. But what is even more important is a change in the vision, in the strategy, and in its implementation. And this is not only something which pertains to government. So as the National Chamber, we consistently emphasize that we are in this together. So the change in vision, the change in strategy, the change in implementation has to be done by government, but it also needs to be done by the employers themselves. It needs to be taken on board by the employees, by the students, including the teachers, the educators, particularly when we're talking about digital skills and green skills. These are new. So even our educators, just like the employer needs to be constantly updated of what there is out there on the market, the educators need to be up to scratch on what the current world is offering in the immediate present, but also in the future. Before going on into detail into some of the proposals, I'd like to make a small observation. And this, I'm going to mention it because it directly impinges on our competitiveness, on our productivity, and also the output by the employees in terms of efficiency, efficacy, and quality. As the National Chamber, we constantly insist that we need to always increase our quality offering as a country. So, general government expenditure on education, if we were to take the period 2017 to 2021, general government expenditure on education increased by 51%, which is quite a hefty amount. However, the expenditure on education relative to the GDP remained constant at around 5% of the GDP. So whilst we're seeing an increase on one side, we're not seeing an increase on the other side. So ultimately, I think we need to look at ourselves internally. And again, I say it's government, employees, employers, educators, etc. to make sure, because ultimately it's not a matter of how much money is put in, but when it is put in, what is being put in, what for, and the how. I think these are 4 areas which we really need to address. Now, some of our ideas, and I've split them in business incentives directly for businesses, incentives which affect students directly, what we need to do to address also third country nationals, what government needs to do, and last but not least, the teachers. So I'm going to start with the last one, the teachers. I think everybody agrees that teachers have a very important role in our community, and therefore we need to make sure that they are properly remunerated. But alongside with the proper remuneration, we need to make sure that there are set KPIs which must be reached at an education level. And I also believe that there needs to be mandatory training and exposure, particularly on skills like new green skills, new digital technology, etc. With respect to business, my colleague, my friend now, Isabella, rightly so mentioned and emphasized on R&I as a country. Yes, our take-up on R&I funding, on R&I incentives is pretty low. And it is something which we as a National Chamber constantly advocate in favor of. In fact, we have a number of projects going on, including with the University of Malta, to see how we can increase uptake in R&I, and we have a number of proposals. One of them is the business tax incentives, where basically the businesses investing in R&I get 100% tax refund, 150, tax refund back. And also, we would like to see a differentiation in EU funding when it comes on an R&I project, which is a blue sky project, and R&I funding for innovation, which is more on the commercialization aspect. Students, when it comes to students, we think that students are not really aware of the opportunities that the country offers, that the world ultimately offers, and therefore we believe that having student placements within the business community itself from a younger age would be much more beneficial. So we would like to see our secondary students being placed in internships, in work exposure within the business community at secondary level. Another thing that we would like to see happening is that certain subjects shouldn't be taught on their own, but certain subjects need to be integrated in the day-to-day learning of other subjects. Let's take technology. You have students who love technology, you have students who hate technology, but we all know that we will not manage to survive unless everyone is digitally savvy. So rather than having a subject which specifically teaches technology, and where you have half of the students looking forward to it, and half of the students gruntling and saying, oh, Jesus Christ, I have to go into my technology class. I would have preferred to go into a class of history, geography, or whatnot. There are certain skills which we can incorporate in the general curricula. When it comes to employment of foreign nationals, both from the EU and also from, particularly when it comes to third country nationals, I believe that if we were to look at our current key employment initiative structure and rehash it, taking into consideration and giving due importance to green skills, to the digital transition, we would be able to attract talent which we currently do not have in Malta, but which we might possibly have along the years, but which we need at the moment. Then there are a number of other issues. For example, we're talking about green skills. We have the CBAM directive, where we know that we need to have verifiers in order to actually verify what is being produced, etc. We do not have them as a country. We do not know where we're going to look for them. So I believe that we also need to be a bit more proactive as a country. We know what EU legislation is being drafted. We get to know even a year in advance of the areas which will be focused on. And I believe that we can't, as a country, keep on waiting till the last minute, till the eve of the coming into force of any particular directive, first of all, to voice our position as a country. We are a micro-island state. There is no other country within the European Union who is as small as us. We are just 316 square kilometers. But more important than that, we have to make sure that as a country, we have the proper infrastructure. And when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm not only talking about the roads infrastructure, the technological infrastructure, the human capital infrastructure, to be able to embrace all the changes that we need to adapt to ultimately have a better world.
Dr. Putelli, thank you so much for sharing the employer's perspective there. Now I'm intrigued to hear what the worker's perspective is in this regard. And seeing that reform of education and transversal skills were possibly mentioned quite well, a number of people thought that the reform of education is one of the policy changes they would introduce. I believe in your pre-budget document a couple of weeks ago, you were rather skeptical about our education system, and you said our education system, quote and unquote, is not preparing our students for life skills. So life skills might fit in transversal skills as well. So do you think addressing head-on this skills shortage, we should focus first on reforming our education system or start elsewhere?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. And skills is something that we not just we talk about and participate as a Workers' Union in policy making and reforms, but also in implementing. As you know, industrial relations and collective bargaining in Malta is performed on organizational level. So during negotiations for a collective agreement, we have specific clause on training, skills, education, all this. And from the feedback that we're getting from all sides, there are a multitude of problems about tackling shortage of skills or reskilling or upskilling. It depends on which area you want to talk about. When we were talking about in our proposals, we were talking about the fact that a lot of people, majority of Maltese people, don't have what it takes, life skills like financial literacy. We meet many workers who, even though they have good salaries, they don't manage their salaries properly. So they complain that after 3 weeks, they're broke.
Exactly.
And that's something that is very worrying, not to mention about pensioners, that they have the same problem. So what we see that we are lacking is critical thinking, to question. In every workplace, to question, not to question the authority, but to question how we are thinking. And that is something that even myself, I learned at the university, because there was a huge wall on it and said that this is the place for thinkers. Why is just the university the place of thinkers? Why shouldn't be all Malta the place of thinkers? Why shouldn't it be, as a trade unions and as employers, we have sessions of critical thinking, thinking about all processing, all human resources, what's happening. And that will transpire not just to the workplace, but in our communities. Why we don't question the way we do things? And you know, as a Maltese, because it was always done this way.
True.
And that's what really bothers me, because the whole world is changing, and we need to change and adapt. And if we stay at status quo, we will become dinosaurs. And we need to change, because we are part of a changing movement, and we cannot stop. But it's not just one-sided, it's not just employers, it's not just the government, it's not just... So, synergy between all stakeholders is fundamental of what we need to do. If we are going to, for example, medical cannabis, when we had issues about investments coming to Malta and having lack of employees who have certain skills. So synergy between the government of where the economy is heading, niche investments, foreign direct investments, employers, trade unions. So we know exactly where the economy is going. Together with educational institutes, we can direct our students, our adults, of where we will, in every workplace, of where the economy is going, on what skills can be needed. And then, of course, it comes not just about transversal skills and upskilling, but also salaries. Training is provided, and most of the employees are fed up of doing training for absolutely nothing, and they're saying, listen, I do the training, what's on it for me? Am I going to progress in my career? And that's why now, in most of the collective agreements, there are career paths. So you don't just start as a clerk or office manager and you stop there. You can progress. You know exactly what's your career path. You know what exactly your skills need to do. The problem arises when we start talking about green skills and just transitions, because nobody is talking exactly where we are going. What are the issues? What are the new industries? Okay, we know about the industries, but what types of jobs there are? How are we going to perform? What's digitalization? What is going to be about artificial intelligence? How this will impact the jobs? Because most investments, most organizations will still be the same, but the kind of jobs that we do will definitely change. And so the synergy between like,
Dr. Portelli.
My name.
Scure, we
So
always together.
Joseph, I have to share this. So I think you see Marta as much more than you see your wife.
Most definitely.
And
We
you forgot
were
her name.
joking about this, that in every panel, we're
No.
together. And thank God that we have very good relationship, even as Chamber and General Gas Union. We share same policies. On others, we don't agree. But like Marta said, this is in it together. It's not just employers and employees. It's all stakeholders. And where we need Malta to go. Then, when we start talking about the mismatch and upskilling and reskilling, yes, there is. And that's why we asked for, during the Malta National Employment Policy 2021-2030, we said we need a survey of all the skills in Malta. So we start from there. Like any other organization, you start from taking stock of your skills, you identify the skills gaps, and you direct your actions over there. And that's what we did. And the first result, I think they were issued on February, and most probably till the end of the year, we have the full picture. And then we can start addressing those skills gaps together with the industry where we are going.
I'm seeing someone that the National Skills Council is working on.
I was coming to the Skills Council, because that's something that's lacking in every workplace. Apart from transversal skills, we need to start measuring experience. And the Skills Council, an essential component in all of this. It needs to be there, it needs to function, it needs to start assessing the skills, and we need to address those and how they can measure them, and then the employer, how they can compensate for that. Because sometimes, and even in collective agreements, we do, for example, that you need a degree or a diploma plus 5 years experience. Because that experience, it needs to be measured, and it's essential. And we're seeing this when, on another issue, we have lack of trades. And this is affecting in every workplace, in every economic sector. The lack of trades that we have, and we were talking about this with Martes at the MCSD level, and I said, if you need a carpenter, you have to wait months. And someone, I think Paul, said, you're wrong, you need years to get someone qualified as a carpenter to do your work at home. And that's affecting in every workplace. Exactly. So all these skills, all these trades, or upskilling, reskilling because of the green jobs and the just transition, we need to address this. But it cannot be just the government or the employees or the employers.
So I have some good news
for you.
We
need everyone to focus their actions together in synergy.
So I have some good news for you, because mentioning work readiness, we've got Matthew Caruana, who runs an organization, a non-profit organization, if not mistaken, named the Junior Achievement Malta, part of an international network as well. You focus on financial literacy, something that Joseph mentioned, work readiness, and also life skills, so to speak. So my question to you, Matthew, in the context of this event is, do you think that our young Maltese and non-Maltese are ready for this green and digital transition?
If I had to go with a quick answer, it would be no.
No.
And for a simple reason. I think we kept on focusing on the educational aspect, or the academic system, let me be more specific, keeps focusing on. And I saw at the beginning there was less content heavy. We keep focusing on imparting knowledge. And we see education as something where we need to impart knowledge, where knowledge can be sourced from various spaces, various online sources, at work, in the street, in families, and everything. We need to look at educational system, the academic side, to be more, as it was mentioned before, preparing people not for work, but for life. Because we don't know what work will be in the next few years. With AI, with all the transitions, with all the new areas coming in, we cannot prepare people for work that is needed today. I'm saying it from an education side, from the young age. Sure. We need to prepare them for education. We speak about financial capability now. So we need to move into actually learning life skills, entrepreneurship, creative thinking, critical thinking. While on the other hand, we see And studies also shown, I think there was something done by the Institute of Innovation and Creativity, that actually the creativity and innovation in students decreases in school. Because we're seeing school as a series of exams, a series of the next step. And this is also the problem we have with all the reforms we had in education, that we saw short term. And we always try to fix the problem that the employers and employees are facing now. But we need to prepare the kids for later on. So I think we need to start seeing the skills shortages, the issue about it, and education as more holistic. So we need not only the teachers, which need to impart new skills in the students, not knowledge specifically, but more the way to think, the way to study, the way to research, the love of learning, we need to impart that as well. And this is what teachers need training to do, because if we focus on digital skills, green skills, our teachers are not equipped with those. These are new things coming up that the teachers didn't know, didn't learn themselves. So in certain cases, digital skills, the student knows more than the teacher. Nowadays, we're reaching that age where the kids know more than the teacher themselves. So we need to train teachers to teach differently and focus more on transversal skills. The issue I have with transversal skills, which is, yes, the right way of teaching them, is that they are taught as part of different subjects and different curriculums. I fear that so far history has shown that when we have these transversal skills, they kind of get abandoned by everyone. No one takes ownership. Everyone thinks the others are doing it, and therefore they get lost. So we need to focus more on life skills rather than content. But coming to my point on seeing education as more holistic, it is our youth, our employees, our kids do not only learn from schools. They learn as well from what they see out there. So when we're talking about these new skills we need and the green skills and ESG, we need to also make sure we're giving them the right messaging and the right examples of leadership. So our leadership in families, employment, government, and national and everywhere need to constantly give the good example of good leadership, of planning, of forward-looking. Because if we have politicians, because of the nature of how politics work, think short-term, employers thinking short-term to satisfy either regulation changes or quick profit opportunities, and teachers looking at the next exam, that I need to move my kids to the next exam. So they're getting a constant example of short-term planning. So obviously this cycle of short-term planning keeps on going and going because we do not have enough examples of forward-looking. We mentioned in the previous panel the issues of the electricity, of transport, the problem with education. We've been mentioning these for years.
Very true.
And we know it's a problem, but because our reforms tend to be short-term, we are still struggling to keep up with the change of times. So, in my opinion, we need to look more as a life education, because if we have kids who are more proactive to learning, more adaptable, more entrepreneurial, then with reskilling and upskilling and their continuous learning, they will get the knowledge they need to do the job at that time.
Jonathan, I don't know, but listening to Matthew, Joseph, and Martes, they all mentioned proactiveness. Now, Martes and Joseph, possibly they're representing the private sector, you're representing the public sector, and they seem to be calling upon the public sector to be more proactive when it comes to addressing the shortage in the skills we're having. Besides the RRP aspects, which is another toolbox of opportunities to the authorities to address this challenge, how are you trying to unlock other EU funds and programs to address this challenge?
Well, basically, being the last speaker after all these, quite a daunting task, because they've raised quite a number of points. Whilst Isabel started giving a context a little bit where the EU and where Malta stands, Obviously, there is more to the Maltese context than what statistics narrate, because basically one has to discuss what was our starting point. And I think that's very important. So when you speak and compare, discussing and pointing out what is the starting point, what was the starting point, gives a better context to the reality where we are in. It was a pleasure to hear both Dr. Portelli and Josef about the priorities they see. And I look at my team and I see job well done. Because if you look at the ESF Plus program, all these elements are included in the program. And here I see that there is an opportunity of using EU money, which might not be as visible. So under my responsibility, I have the Resilience Recovery Plan, the ERDF, the Just Transition Fund, fisheries, agricultural. But the least visible is the ESF Plus. But the most impactful is the ESF Plus, because it impacts people and people's lives. I enjoyed the last comments because we speak a lot about content, but not when we speak about skills. When we speak about skills, we confuse content and skills. We speak about green skills, but what are green skills? I think there again, when we speak about green skills, we are still going in the box of speaking about content, not really of skill. If you have a carpenter, being green, it's about using now engineered material and being able to use engineered material. Being green is about knowing how to build in a different way the same thing. So there is a little bit of confusion in the discussion as well sometimes. And I enjoyed the discussion about the issue of let's not focus on content, but skills. Call it life skills, transversal skills, call them what you want. But let's really speak about skills. And hence, when I look at reform of the educational system, which in the ESF Plus we do take into consideration, my reaction and my now personal reaction is stop reforming the educational sector. Let's start understanding what's working. I've been working on funds now for a lot.
Almost 20 years, I believe.
Well, all my working life.
Exactly.
So I started at the University of Malta, moved to the public administration, always dealing with EU funding. And I think we are not letting enough time to pass to understand whether what we're doing is working or not. When it comes to the ESF, so we will support the private sector.
Can you share a tangible example? Because you said the ESF Plus is extremely impactful. In what ways? Can you give us one quick example?
In what way? For example, students learn in different ways. Some learn in the academic way, others learn by doing. Hence, the focus on vocational education, which is significant. If you look at the ESF and the ERDF, in the vocational education, we've invested more than 100 million over the past 15 years. More than 100 million in the vocational sector, which shows the importance that we need to transit from the academic dimension, focused on exam, from one exam to another. So no wonder the short-term vision in anything that we do, because even when we're young, we're only thinking about the next exam, and even the educational system is geared towards the next exam. But what the ESF is trying is looking at learning outcomes. Well, what was learning outcomes all about? It's we need to understand whether our children, my children, have learned the principles of mathematics. And that is what's important. It's not important that they get 90, 95 out of 100 in the exam, but they know logic. If I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, so when we have these discussions, they are very personal discussions because I take them back home and I see what happens in my household. And that's the way we need to look at things. Sometimes we tend to think a little bit too macro. Let's think micro. If I go home and my 10-year-old, what is her biggest problem? Logic. I start discussing mathematics with her, the problem is logic. So the failure of the educational system is not because we need to reform it, but We need to change the way we look at that education. And that's what, through the ESF, we try to do. We're still not there. What the EU has done since 20 years, since accession, is it has pushed us as a country to think beyond tomorrow and look a little bit longer. Learning outcomes, the project was funded and closed off in 2016. It's being introduced now. We will see the first results, in my opinion, in 5–10 years' time. So, but obviously, it's too far away, and we try to measure with what we have, tools in the immediate. But I think there is convergence, and listening to Josef and Dr. Portelli, looking at what we're trying to fund under the ESF+, there is a lot of convergence. I think there is the need to engage more in discussions, open discussions of what works, what doesn't work, and how to do what we're doing different. In fact, to what Josef said, it's not what is the kind of job of tomorrow. It's the same. It's how which will change. It's not the what, but the how will change.
What we're missing in this discussion, however, is that, okay, with all good intentions, you're investing money in vocational skills, for instance, but I know Dr. Portelli, she's aware of this. At MCAST, only 2 students enrolled themselves in the carpentry program. So we have another reality of this behavioral change in our youths that we're not really talking about much, not even today, but nationally as well. Matthew might be well versed here because he works with young people as well. So the expectations and how young people perceive working career, professional career is possibly completely different from ours. But with that, Isabel, I might come back to you very shortly, but I'd like to open the floor to anyone who wants to share his views, insights on what we're discussing. So feel free to do that straight away. Ideally, just I urge you to be extremely brief. So I'm seeing Ruth Debrincat from the National Skills Council, if not mistaken. So, Ms. Debrincat.
Since we were involved in the discussion, so the National Skills Council has been given an executive function as of last March. And needless to say, we have met with various of the panelists today and discussed both skills shortages, transversal skills, compulsory education, and a whole lot of the words showing up in the Slido screen. We are also applying for various instruments, EU funding instruments, both the technical support instruments and the ESF funding, in order to address these challenges that you have speaking about. But I wanted to point out that we really believe that stakeholder engagement, discussions on what the challenges are and how to meet these discussions both in the short term and in the long term, which are both very valid perspectives to look at. And we will be doing so with industry partners, social partners, but also with the various public entities and departments, given their role in policy making. Because maybe one thing we need to highlight is that skills development is a horizontal topic, and it affects every vertical component within government and within policy making. By the way, it's also the European Year of Skills, so all this ties into the objectives of the EU related to the European Year of Skills. Thank you.
That was extremely fitting to mention. Thank you so much. So with that observation, listening to all the stakeholders had to say, what one key recommendation would you give to the authorities and also to other interested stakeholders to try and address this challenge which we're discussing this morning?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, and it was very interesting to hear from all of you. I would have to say also, as a comment to what we just heard, that for us, for the Commission, it's very important to have this constant dialogue with stakeholders. This is something that we do both in the context of the European semester at large, but also when it comes earlier on on the design of the plan, and now when it comes to the implementation of the RRP. So this is the reason why when we come to Malta, we have meetings with social partners to precisely hear their concerns and also to understand what they see as possible hurdles in the implementation of the plan, but more largely also on the challenges when we come to the European semester aspect. Now, I think looking at one of the main reasons why we are here now, which is indeed the RRP, implementation of the RRP, what I would indeed like to say, and Celine said it at large, and of course it's also very true for the case of the skills and education, is the important role that the stakeholders and each one of you has to play in the implementation of the plan. Listening to the different interventions and also to the diagnosis, okay, I've made a very sketchy diagnosis of the challenges, but we also then heard from the different participants of more specific concerns and examples of these concerns. I would really like to, if you allow me, to make a little summary where I will not be covering all the measures in this area that the plan has, but I would like to do a quick mapping between the challenges that have been described and the measures that are present in the plan, knowing, of course, that the RRP is not a panacea for all challenges in every domain. Education is very much a national competence, and even from the EU perspective, there are other tools, policy tools, but also funding tools, and Jonathan has already mentioned the role that the ESF can play in this area. But I would say that, so if we look at the first broad challenge, which is not enough workers with the right skills, and especially with some higher skills. So here what we need is to act. It is not just a recommendation, but it's something that, at least to some extent, the plan also entails as a response. We need to, looking very far ahead, we have to make sure that we don't lose the young. We have heard from one of the participants about young at maybe secondary school, but it's also important that they don't leave school. So one thing that is very important to address is early leavers. And sometimes even at a very young age, children that don't manage to learn how to write or to read. And this is really then, they are out of the economic activity force. So this has to be avoided, and there's a measure in the plan that tries to address, to some extent, this. Then, because there are not enough workers, let's use everything that the population can offer in terms of working resources. And this means some activation policies, and this means also bringing into the labor market some groups of the population that are out. So older workers, and this is particularly true for women, lower skilled workers that are not workers because they don't enter sufficiently the market. On this issue of broad skills, of course, you have a certain population, so upskilling and reskilling is going to be one way to stay out, to come out of this situation of a very low-skilled based, let's say, working population. So there are also a certain number of measures in the plan that try to address this by training trainers for vocational training, by offering digital solutions in terms of training and in terms of guidance, because sometimes more than training is the guidance to see what you have to train out, for which there is a demand, how to do it. So this guidance is very important, and the fact that the solution is digital has also the advantage of, at least to some extent, break the geographical barrier. So in that sense, it's more inclusive also for those that maybe are not at the right place if this was a presential offer. It's also a measure that it's independent of the working status. So precisely that is addressing people that are not necessarily in the labor market. I would also say, and this joins some of the comments we've heard here, that in the context of the implementation of the smart specialization strategy, there are also some measures that try to go, I mean, sometimes we say the triangle, but maybe I would even call it a square. So trying to combine the inputs and the need of cooperation between the education system, the training system, the employers, and somehow the potential employees. And this is something that can be done through the implementation of some of the measures of the smart strategy. That is also part of the plan. I mean, then there are also a certain number of which we could see as more transversal knowledge in terms of digital, with measures to upgrade the knowledge, is also in the public sector on cybersecurity, on use of IT skills, etc. And then there are also a certain number of measures specifically for, let's say, the 3 or 4 areas that I mentioned. On green in particular, and I know I take your point that what are green skills? Indeed, they are many things, and in some cases it's just about skills that already exist but using somehow different technology or materials. In other cases, almost new professions. In the case, for instance, of building renovation, I think there's a certain number of professional categories that need to be boosted, and this is one of the measures that exists in the plan, by precisely helping training and skilling and reskilling. In this, I think there are 6 new categories that leads to a skill card, and then this skill card can be used as a kind of a proof that the skills are there. And my understanding is that up to now already some 500 people are benefiting from this, and this is will be growing. I don't know if I have the time to continue, but
unfortunately, we're running out of time. But
yeah, I understand.
I was just struck how you managed to link all the observations and link them to the RRP itself. So that's fascinating.
So what I wanted to say is that if someone is interested in more detail, I could try to help you understand the mapping between the challenges that we identified and the existing measures, and I could point to measures in each one of these 4 areas that
Isabella Grillo, Director within the DG ECFIN at the European Commission, Dr. Marta Sportelli, CEO of the Malta Chamber, Joseph Bugeja, Secretary General of the General Workers Union, Matthew Caruana, CEO of Junior Achievement Malta, Jonathan Vassallo, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry for EU Affairs. So we have another coffee break, so another 15-20 minutes, and we'll be back for the 3rd and last part of the EU annual event on RRP in Malta.